Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 13. So this week we are wrapping up our research project part 1. Okay, so our third writing project of the semester. And so what we're going to be doing now is making sure that we're compiling all of the different sources that we need for that worksheet. We have a couple more that we'll be working on this week. And so I just want to go over some of the resources that I have for you for completing those, okay? One thing I wanted to show you, I can't remember if I went over this last week, is I went ahead and started a sample research project part 1 to share with you. So if you look at this, I went ahead and started making my own. You can look and see how I have filled in the worksheet just to make sure, you're on the right track. If you're kind of having questions about how it's supposed to look or anything like that, I went ahead and started making one. One of the details that you might notice here is that in my quote, I have an in-text citation. And with the in-text citation, it's just really important that you put the period after the parentheses. That's something that I hope not to have to take any points off for, but it's something that I know sometimes people are taught that you're supposed to put the period first, and like maybe you put the citation at the end of the paragraph. And a lot of times when we're teaching that, well, when high school teachers or before that are teaching that, it's because it's a nice shortcut to get you in the practice. But unfortunately, you do need to unlearn that because we don't do periods before in-text citations pretty much ever. Unless we have a block quote, in which case we don't have quotation marks. So it should always come after the parentheses. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, and so these are my entries. If you go down to the very, very, very bottom, I know I've had some students, some of my best students who always follow directions and are really careful, have been surprised by this detail. So I wanted to make sure and remind you too that at the very bottom of this worksheet, there is a works cited page. So if you copied and pasted the research project part 1 into a document, some people may not have copied and pasted the works cited title on the third page. You will really need to make sure that you have a works cited page because it is worth quite a lot of points on our project. I wanted to make sure that you had practice finding and analyzing different types of sources, but also practice citing different types of sources. So again, just make sure that you include your citations at the bottom. Okay, and then I wanted to just talk briefly about we're skipping social media as an assignment. Even though we're doing a lot of the other types of sources as assignments, we're also skipping books just because books tend to be fairly easy to cite, but I will be including some citation information just because I've had a student ask about it. And if I'm going to write it for somebody, I'll go ahead and share it with everyone. But if you are using a type of social media, sorry, my cat is determined to be involved in this video, then just know that you can find ways of citing different types of social media on these links. One of the nice things about citing social media is they're basically all going to be the same. It's going to be the author, so usually like a username or maybe sometimes last name, first name, the title of the page, then you'll have the hosting website. So the title of the page will be in quotes. The hosting website will be in italics. And then you're going to have the date and make sure that the date is in MLA format. So it should be the day of the month and then the abbreviated version of the month and then the year and then a comment and then URL, period. And that is it. And so if you need any help with those, if you want me to look over and make sure that it looks right, please feel free to do so. But we are going to skip this one just because we just used social media for our last project. Okay. I wanted to make sure that we took time to work on documentary and podcast just because these can be kind of tricky to cite. So you might actually have a pretty easy time finding a documentary and a podcast for your project. The key is going to be making sure that you can cite it effectively. One of the most important things, and I know I wrote this in the instructions, and since we're online, I'm sure y'all are reading instructions pretty carefully. But just as a reminder, you don't need to watch the whole documentary. I only watched the trailer to get this quote. And so you can see here how I cited this documentary, though. We have the last name, first name, comma, and the word and then first name, last name, because there are 2 different directors. And then there is the title. This is Peacock Productions because Peacock is a streaming service. I could also have put Peacock in italics. And then the year that it was produced, and then the URL. Sorry, I'm slowing down. I need some more coffee. So basically, if you have a film that you have watched on a streaming service, it might look like this. It might, and maybe I'll fix this. It might even be more accurate to put Peacock in italics here, to show that that's the streaming website or the streaming service. So if you had a Netflix one, it would look like that. If you have a YouTube one, it's going to look like, you see, I clicked out of it. It's going to be this citation here. And like I said, it's going to be, they're all exactly the same, all the social media types. And so it's actually kind of easy to figure out what that should look like. Okay. Try not to overthink it. It'll be the same as like the Reddit site. Podcasts can also be a little tricky. With both of these, the podcast and the documentary, you're going to just notice that you'll put the author's name and then you're going to have a description of who the author is. So for a documentary, you'll usually have the director. You might also have like an organization who created it, like PBS. It's the same with a podcast where you won't have usually like necessarily like an author in the same way, but you'll have a host. Okay. So this person probably wrote the copy for the podcast. Helm Sally, because this is Sally Helm. Her last name is Helm. And then I'm going to put host to describe her role on the show. Then I'll put the title. History is this week is the title of the podcast. And then I found this was from February 2022. I found this on Spotify. So again, I'm going to put the host website, the host app, the hosting platform, however you want to think of it, in italics. And then I'll have the URL. So these are going to be really similar, podcast and documentary. And so hopefully that will help you. I have a feeling a lot of people will be watching documentaries on YouTube instead. And so just keep in mind, you just need to cite it like another type of social media source. You don't need to listen to the whole podcast, quote the podcast. I found a transcript of the podcast. And so you might just search, once you find an episode that you want to use, search and see if you can find a transcript of it. That will help you get a good quote. That way you can, feel confident you're not misquoting. Yeah. And so I hope that this will be helpful. If any of you are taking 102 with me next semester, we'll be actually doing an analysis of a documentary or a podcast for that class. So this might be really good practice for that citation that you'll be doing in the future if you're taking that class with me. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what y'all have found for these research projects. And if you do have any questions about citations, or if you're having any trouble finding sources, please let me know. One question I've had a few students ask is, they have a very specific topic and they're like, or it's like very recent and they're like, I can't find a documentary about that. So what I would recommend, and I've had the same question for scholarly articles where they're like, well, there's no scholarly article written about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift dating. And it's like, okay, no, but you can definitely find scholarly articles about Taylor Swift. And so just kind of keep that in mind with documentaries too. I was wanting to research Claudette Colvin after listening to a really great podcast about her the other day. And so I was looking at documentaries about her, and there are some, but I actually found a documentary that she's in, that's actually focused on Rosa Parks. And I think that will work okay. I haven't watched it yet. That's part of my future research, right, for the project. But I think that's something to kind of keep in mind, is that sometimes to get the best source, you're going to go just slightly more zoomed out, or more zoomed in on a topic, just to make sure that you can find the best thing with the best information for your particular topic. All right, well, have a great day. And I am looking forward again to reading all of these projects.